All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to support and inspire new trauma therapists just starting out on the trauma-informed journey. I do that with my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0, my online courses and workshops, and the Trauma Therapist newsletter. If you're a therapist of any kind and you work with individuals who've been impacted by trauma, I invite you to head on over to my website at thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. All right, let's get started. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Guy McPherson here. Very excited and honored to have my guest, Shelley Rood. Shelley, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Guy. Oh my gosh, I'm fangirling over you right now, honestly.
Please. Shelley served in the United States Army Reserves for 16 years as an intelligence officer and now is a small business owner and ordained minister, advocating for selfless service in action. Attaining the rank of captain, Shelley served as an S2, a company commander, and more, leading covert intelligence briefings and orchestrating security programs for nearly 4,000 soldiers. Military awards include the Shield of Sparta and the St. Joan D'Arc. Did I pronounce that correctly?
St. Joan of Arc, you got it. We throw a fancy D in there every now and then.
A distinguished military graduate from Western Michigan University, Shelley graduates in May 2022 with her MA in Ministry Studies at Moody Theological Seminary. She's the creator of Others Over Self, a leadership mindset serving people in positions of influence to make a lasting impact on others. She facilitates the Warriors with Warriors program, connecting spiritual warriors with earthly warriors. She's happily married and is tackling the daily challenge of raising 2 boys in an increasingly self-focused society. Shelley, wow, impressive bio, girl. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Sounds fancy when you read it out loud. Sounds like a hot mess when I go through my experience.
Well, look, thanks so much for being here. It's an honor to have you on here. Before we get going, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
You know, what if it's the same answer, Guy?
There you go.
So I'm actually coming to you live from Selfridge Air National Guard Base. We're over here in Macomb, Michigan, right outside Metro Detroit. That is a fun story. So I grew up here, literally one bay over, if you're looking at Lake St. Clair. And I grew up living next door to my grandparents. So we had 2 houses, family property right on the lake. I went to Western Michigan University, distinguished military graduate, captain of the Bronco rifle team, 22 small bore, always has a soft spot in my heart. Yeah, deadly in all kinds of ways, right? And, life brought me back around. I moved back here in 2016 after having conquered the world, as they say, traveled the world, joined the military, realized that the good stuff actually does come from home sometimes. And so I moved back in 2016 and bought my grandparents' home. And so my boys are the 4th generation to grow up inside of those walls that my grandfather built. And I just think that is incredibly special, especially with the brokenness of society that we have.
Definitely. Let's start with how the heck you got into the military. What drew you there?
Well, I mean, I'm a product of my generation. So I grew up with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and April O'Neil as the kick butt investigative journalist reporter. Even Clark Kent, right? And he had the female Lois that was a kick butt journalistic reporter. And so I actually went to school for journalism. That's what my undergrad degree is in. And I always have this deep desire to be a game changer, to be the one who sees what's happening on the inside that is wrong and make change to try to correct it. And so there's something that's always been deep within me that's wanted to stand up for injustice.
Where does that come from, do you think?
You know, if I had another life again, I'm pretty sure I would be a lawyer. And I think it comes from working side by side alongside my father in the construction industry here in downtown Detroit. And we would listen to Rush Limbaugh on the radio and Dr. Laura. And so I would see this juxtaposition between being a business owner, having resources, making change, like kind of paving your path, if you will. And at the same time, we're swinging hammers on houses, and we're trying to rebuild and invest in a community that is literally crumbling beneath us. I did one really dirty, nasty job where the insurance covered it. So it was an insurance claim. And we're in this house, I believe it was in Hamtramck. And it was a hoarder's house when you went in. So this wonderful woman who's working 3 full-time jobs, she has 3 of her grown sons living in the home. And none of the 3 boys, men really, are working. They're this was before cell phones. So they're laying in the beds all day long, watching these teeny tiny box televisions. And this mother is working herself through to the bone, and the house is crumbling around them. She's bringing home whatever they can consume. And so the insurance claim was because the roof was leaking. So as we get in there and we go up to the bedroom and we start tearing down this sheet of plywall that's holding something up, right? So we tear down the sheet of plywall, boom, it falls down to the ground. And there's a dead squirrel that has it's not even a squirrel anymore. It's just there on the sheet of plywall. And this woman had been sleeping in this bedroom for, I don't even know how long it would take for the squirrel to become that decrepit at that point. And, the more you get into the job, you start to peel the wallpaper away, and there's just bugs crawling all behind the wallpaper. And so, really just seeing, again, this juxtaposition between coming from a life, and I'll use this word lightly, of privilege, and yet working with our talents and time and effort and energy to benefit a society and an environment that could and should be better. Right. And somebody in here has to take action. Somebody has to stand up and say, this is unacceptable. We're not going to live this way anymore. And here's what's going to change. And so I think it was just a myriad of those types of experiences where I really got to see that it could be me. I could be the game changer. I could be the one to stand up and make a difference for these people's lives. And even when you get into college, your traditional college, I was someone who joined a sorority. And I witnessed one of my sorority sisters have GHB slipped in her drink. And I witnessed a young man take advantage of her. And I remember at the time thinking, well, she's got better friends than me. Surely one of the friends that she came with will witness what's happening and put a stop to it. And that has haunted me to this day.
Oh, wow.
Somebody has to stand up and say, this is wrong, and we're going to take action.
Well, I appreciate you honestly sharing that. That's hardcore. To have witnessed that and to still have that, right, circling around. Wow, that's intense. So you go through this upbringing, you go to school for journalism. Okay, so walk us through where the military comes in.
Well, now you're just going to learn how self-focused I really am. So when I got into college, you ever hear the freshman 15? That's where you go away to school and you gain 15 pounds and you come home fat. Yep. And I was determined that was not going to be Shelley Rood. I was not going to come home fat. And so when I went for orientation, I saw the soldiers from ROTC. And they were beautiful people. They really represented the military well. And they offered something. You didn't have to join the military. It was called outdoor survival skills. And I loved camping. And so I thought to myself, I'll do that. I'll just take outdoor survival skills. And sure enough, they'll keep me in shape. And then I won't have to worry about the freshman 15. And it worked. Never did I imagine that I would actually join the military. But because of that exposure of that one class, I got to see that change between what happens in your traditional nowadays, your college atmosphere of all the drinking and the partying, which I'll tell you I was a part of. But then on the other hand, there was this group of young people who knew what values were. They knew selfless service. They knew what loyalty and truth were. And I wanted more of that. I was deeply attracted to that depth of humanity. And I was increasingly unhappy with what I was seeing in just the societal Greek culture of what was coming really in the Greek side of things.
So, okay. So what happens? In what capacity, or when did you actually join the military?
I joined while I was in college. There is a program called SMP, Simultaneous Membership, where you can be a member of the armed forces and still finish your degree. So I did join the ROTC program, and upon graduation, I did become a commissioned officer. And I also was part of a military unit during my time
Wow.
in college.
So, as we said, or as I said in your bio, you're a distinguished military graduate from Western Michigan University. What does that sounds amazing? What does that
Doesn't
mean?
it? I know. I love these fancy titles that keep getting thrown at me. It's really quite hilarious. That just means that I minded my manners enough to be able to graduate with a really good GPA, and I could choose my branch. So I wasn't just handed infantry or engineer. They said, Shelley, well, since you're going in the army, within the army, here are the different jobs that you could do. What branch would you like? And I chose military intelligence. I was obsessed with, oh gosh, I'm so dating myself here. I was obsessed with the X-Files, right? Scully and Mulder, and I wanted to be her. I loved her. And so I thought for sure I could be this kick butt FBI agent type female. And that's why I chose intelligence.
Okay. So let me ask you something. So you talked about wanting to stand up and wanting to take action and be a game changer, I think is the phrase you used. That's one thing. The military, yes, you can do those things through that, but there's a lot more that goes with the military, right? There's a lot has it ripples out more into war and combat, and people get killed. So it's almost taking that to the extreme. Talk about that.
It is. It's taking it to the extreme. And I actually heard a pastor tell me years ago that why do we think that humanity is so obsessed with this idea of self-sacrifice? And that it's deeply rooted in Christ as Savior, which, we don't have to talk about theology on today's interview. But that was so intriguing to me you're right. When you are somebody who wants to stand up for good and fight the evil, where does that come from? And why is it more deeply felt in some humans than in others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not somebody who was born and raised I'm not like the preacher's kid where you have a lot of these church people that are just church people through and through, and that's how they were born and that's how things are. And that is not me, and that is not my story. I did not come to the Lord until I was a well-grown adult, until my 30s, late 20s into 30s. And it took me years and years and years of discernment, of asking the hard questions, the tough questions. And then even after I had the change of heart and I understood the Jesus piece of my faith, I still didn't understand religion. Mm-hmm. Because when you look at religion and the impact of religion across American history and just world history, the history of humanity, you want to talk about a ploy. You want to talk about the darkest, dirtiest aspects of humanity tearing each other apart, all in the name of God, right? Even Hitler, all of these dictators that have ever tried to take over the world and have done incredible harm to other humans, it's all been done in the name of God. Mm-hmm. And you're going to tell me that there's a good God? And so these are the questions that I really wrestled with for many, many years. And as an intelligence professional, there is no easy answer for me. Right. And I would imagine, Guy, that you and many of our listeners are very much the same, where you don't get one answer. You get a plethora of textbooks, mm-hmm. and you dig through them and you write doctrines and theses, and you have many, many different theories. And then at the end of the day, you can kind of figure out what you think you believe in and what might be the right answer. Mm-hmm. And that's really the inside world of Shelley's brain. And I think that I'm very like-minded with a lot of our listeners in that way.
Mm-hmm. So you spent 16 years in the military. At what point did you, I want to talk about others over self, and also how you got into that. How did you move from the military? When did this piece on theology come into play here?
Those are great questions because I'm a very non-traditional soldier, if you will. So a lot of people think of the military and they think, oh, I joined for 4 years and then I got out and then I did this. And we talk about the transition period of, well, here you were military and now you're not. Shelley Rood's experience is not that, right? I served primarily in the Army Reserves and I served over a 16-year time span. So during all of that, I also had civilian careers. And so I started in journalism and I worked in broadcast television. I worked in radio. I worked in newspaper. And then I worked in the fitness industry. And alongside of my civilian career, I had my military career. And I didn't talk a lot about my military career because again, I was in intelligence. It was something that really was meant to be kept a secret. I didn't have any social media. So I lived this secret squirrel life for the majority of my adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very challenging thing to do. And there was no Jesus piece to all of it. And so it wasn't until a lot of failure. I have a failed marriage behind me. And that was a marriage that involved PTSD. It involved alcohol. It involved what we call SUD, substance use and abuse. It involved adultery. It involved so many of these messy issues that our audience is very well aware of, unfortunately. And how do you move through that and get into a place of where we are now, right? So it starts with really just the discernment of what does Shelley as a human being believe in? And then what does that look like if you want to do it professionally? So when I had come up towards what I now know as the end of my military career, I was looking for a transfer. I recognized that I wanted to stay in the military. And I didn't think that what the military needed was another intelligence person because I was watching the suicide rates of my friends and I was watching the dirtiness, the nastiness, the grittiness of the substance use, the substance abuse, the cheating on the spouses, or just this unsustainable lifestyle of military culture. And I felt like something needed to be done, right? And the answer was the chaplain corps, because the chaplain corps is the heartbeat of the spirituality of our soldiers and airmen and service members. There needed to be more chaplains. If you don't know, there's a national shortage of chaplains in the United States military. And this comes after, in 2017, the United States military expanded their list of formally recognized religions. They doubled it. Now there's 212 religions of all different kinds, to include hedonism and being pagan. I mean, so much more than just Christianity, where you can be a representative of the spirit. And so what's happening is, because there's a lack of chaplains, you have a military chaplain who's serving overseas who's in charge of 1,500 souls. And you know, as a therapist, that the biggest difference you can make is in a one-on-one discussion. How can you possibly shepherd 1,500 souls spread off across giant nation states? It doesn't happen. So I thought, the answer here, clearly God has laid into me a calling to be a military chaplain. So that's what I'm going to do. And I put the paperwork in.
Oh.
And 4 years later, it didn't happen. How, right? How could it not happen? There's a shortage. Shelley's perfect. This is her calling. Long story short, right? It's God's will. So we did run into some paperwork errors, and I hit what's called time and grade, where in the military, unless you have a certain number of professional education requirements, you can't stay a captain. You have to either make major or you get out. And I couldn't get my educational requirement because they knew that I was trying to be a chaplain. So it was just a numbers game. And so all of a sudden, one day, I got discharged honorably, but my discharge orders came in an email. Could you imagine if you're like sitting at your desk one day doing your job that you love, and this is like your dedicated career, and all of a sudden your boss emails you, hey, due to a technical difficulty, you're no longer in.
Oh boy.
Pack up your stuff, turn all your gear back in. Like life-changing, right? And just such a shock. And so I fought it as well. So my chaplain recruiter said, not a problem, Shelley. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to re-enlist directly into chaplain corps. Okay, well, now we've been 3 years down that road. And Guy, that's not happening.
Oh, man.
I have been medically disqualified from re-enlisting. So you have this call to be a military chaplain you have the nationwide shortage of chaplains, and you have the military saying, Shelley, no, thank you. And what do? I'm sure a lot of us have walked our professional careers and have been faced with this conundrum of what do we do, right? And so here I am, however many years down the road, and now I'm qualified. I became an ordained minister. I earned my master's. I'm here. I have everything I need to be a military chaplain, except for the military's permission. And so the good news is that I truly believe that I've heard the voice of God twice in my life. And after my discharge orders came in, I was just a sobbing mess saying, what are you talking about, right? And the Lord told me, Shelley, do you need to be a soldier to serve the soldiers? No, God doesn't ask a question unless he already knows the answer. And so here we are, right? I'm outside of the military. And what we've done is we've really just used our company as our ministry. And so we founded Others Over Self as really our mindset. It's our leadership mindset, and it really stands for putting the needs of others over our own. And this is a mindset that is non-controversial, really. I mean, anybody can stand up behind it, right? The only people that don't like others over self are the ones who want to be self-focused. Okay, that's fine. That's not our target audience anyway. But what we do is we have a heart for military people and for first responders. And so what's unique about our company is that when you hire us to teach, train, educate, and do workshops and seminars, the person standing up in front of the room, every instructor that we have is a veteran or current military or first responder. So you're getting that real life experience. And so what this does is it actually pours back into our first responder community by teaching them that they have value outside of their time actually on the books.
Okay. So let me just back up a little here. So you created this in order to, so did you actually get into the military as a chaplain?
No.
No, that didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
Wow. That's intense. And so you decided, okay, we're going to create this company.
Yeah, we're doing it anyway.
Okay. And let me so this is othersoverself.com. And you specifically do what? Teach? What do you guys teach and train?
Yeah, we teach and train workshops that are forward thinking. So they are life skills. We do a lot around work-life balance. And it all falls under mental wellness, mental health, which I know you have a deep appreciation for. We're not clinicians, but a lot of the members that are our instructors, they are clinicians. So in my world of being military, I love working with fellow military women. You know what's a unicorn? A unicorn is a woman who has served in the military, who is a certified or licensed mental health professional. If that is you, if you're listening and that is you, I just want to applaud you up and down, because that is so rare and so difficult to find. And so those are the type of people that I just want to lift up and I want to champion. And so I find whatever they're currently teaching and I help become a platform for them so they can reach a bigger audience, so that they can recognize and learn how unique and special that they actually are. So one of my ladies is Laverne Santangelo, and Laverne is a licensed professional counselor. And she got out of the Army as a major. She served as a major. She has such a wonderful depth of experience to her. And Laverne is somebody who personally, she shares publicly that she's had multiple abortions. And she took that step. Some of them were actually under the direction of her commander when she was in the military. Her commander told her that her career could never take off, or she was going to be limited with what she could do. So she should just go ahead and have an abortion. And it wasn't until later in life that she realized the type of trauma that she was internalizing as a result of those actions. So now, fast forward Laverne down the road, she's a licensed professional counselor, and her specialty is post-abortive healing. When you can take somebody who is an active military Army major and provide that type of therapy service, I mean, that is so special and so unique. And that's the type of story that I love to share.
Post-abortive healing. Wow, that is indeed a specialization. My gosh. It's interesting. to hear you talk about how things unfolded for you. And obviously you gave us the thumbnail sketch, but the common theme I heard was this passionate searching to find those areas where there was almost where people needed to be celebrated more, and you're like, well, okay, this door's not opening for me clearly, so I'm gonna create one right here, and there's something really inspiring about that. It's like you're doing it on your own terms.
We're doing it. When I got out of the military, when I was discharged, I started to look at the statistics around female veterans. And I was shocked and floored at some of the statistics. So depending on what report you look at, a lot of our listeners know when we talk about military sexual trauma, 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 people who have served in the military have experienced military sexual trauma. Why does that statistic exist?
We're talking about women or just
That's
anyone?
the scary thing. So you can apply it to women, sure. The scary thing is that's the same number that applies to the men.
Wow.
1 in 3 and 1 in 4. Tell me what company, if they came out with their annual report and 1 in 3, 1 in 4 of our employees experience sexual trauma, no, that's totally unacceptable. And that's just one example of a data set, right, that I find an issue with. So another one, this one is specific to the military women. 42% of the women in this report said that they do not feel respected or valued. 42% of our nation's heroes that are women say they don't feel respected and valued. These are the women that are taking up the guns and kicking in the doors and taking down the bad guys. Does that not break your heart, guy, that these women don't feel respected and valued?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you call 911 and somebody shows up and helps you, how do they not feel respected and valued, right? So here, the issue is not them. The issue is us. There is something wrong, genuinely wrong in our society and in how we as human beings are choosing to live and show and hold gratitude and appreciation for others, and we're missing the mark. It's not good enough. And so that's why my heart really does go out to those first responders and even to those who serve. When you talk about chaplains or who's on the front line, right? When there's a funeral, when there's a really tough situation and the first responder is the one who shows up on the scene, they're the ones that are in the dirt and the grit and they're witnessing the horrors. And it goes along with our mental wellness professionals, right? Because how many third-party trauma stories do you pick up?
Mm-hmm.
And you walk out of your office and you go home that night, man, and you cannot get it out of your head. We all have these shared experiences. And I think that there genuinely needs to be more focus on what we as professionals, as the ones who stand up for good, as the ones who try to correct the situations, we need a little bit more self-care and love as well.
When in your experience in the reserves, you talked about the amount of people who are feeling disrespected. Did you feel that? Did you see that culture?
Oh, yeah. It's undeniable. It's undeniable. I mean, so even from the outside in, right? So I've been the person who's been in uniform and I've had a civilian come up and spit on me.
Oh my gosh.
For no other reason other than I was wearing a military uniform, right? And so there's a portion of society that is just very anti-military from the beginning. Even within my own family. So my father, right, we talked a little bit about my background, very much build yourself up by the bootstrap, you get what you earn, that type of attitude. And so his view on somebody in the military was that they couldn't cut it or they couldn't make it in the civilian world, or they got in trouble, so they chose to go into the military, couldn't hack it, right? That type of attitude also exists. And there's so many stereotypes about military people that just are incorrect. And so that's why one of the programs that our company runs right now is called Warriors with Warriors. And this is a program that is funded by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And this program specifically teaches people of faith, like pastors, preachers, Bible study leaders, all of our faith people, it teaches them how to have a better conversation with military personnel. Because even the federal government recognizes the power and the impact that an individual conversation can make on another human being.
Mm-hmm.
And what this looks like is what we know as military cultural competency. So one of the lessons that we teach is military cultural competency. And this is just like military 101. Here's the branches of the military. Here's things to talk about when you get an opportunity to share openly with somebody in the military. We think that we can have these conversations lightheartedly, but as you as a therapist know, sometimes the littlest words can be a trigger. And so what's happening is our military personnel are being triggered over and over and over again by these everyday common societal phrases, like things, thank you for your service. So that's a phrase that actually can do more intended harm than good. And the reasons behind that are because there's guilt. There's a lot of our military members that don't want to be thanked for their service.
Mm-hmm.
They joined because they needed the money, or they joined because they were homeless. Like there's no honor in why they joined. Mm. So when you say to them, thanks for your service, now they actually just feel guilty.
Wow.
And then another phrase that we teach people to really steer clear from is, I'll pray for you. And please take it from me as a chaplain, as somebody who represents the spirit of the human being, just a blanket statement of I'll pray for you is really not okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to remember that military people believe in freedom of religion. And, you know, Guy, I don't know where your spirituality is, but if somebody who worshiped the devil came up to you and said, Guy, I'll pray for you tonight, you're going to say, okay, thank you. No, thank you. Right. I mean, that's how military people feel when me as a Christian approach them and I don't know them.
Right.
So there's all these questions in our heads immediately about, well, who are you going to pray to? And I didn't ask you to pray for me. It's not going to do any good anyway. All this negative talk immediately is sparked by that phrase, I'll pray for you. Mm-hmm. And so there's better ways that we can have those conversations with our military people that won't necessarily trigger such harsh reactions and can actually do a lot of good.
You talk a lot about stereotypes in the military, and it's from my perspective, and I think generally we have this perspective that it's such a man's game in a sense, right? And we'll accept these women in here, but really we're not going to be respectful. I mean, that's the sense that I get, and that's still going on.
That's reality.
That's reality.
And it's almost comical. I mean, to a woman of my age, of my generation, of my experience, it's comical. Like, what do you mean? Women can join the military? Right. Hello? Like that happened decades ago. Why are we still having this conversation? You know, it's to a point now where it is almost comical. But yet it didn't happen. It happened within our generation. I mean, the right for women to vote was less than 4 generations ago from me. Mm-hmm. And we have to remember that we're not that far removed from these significant societal changes. And it's very difficult, Guy. I appreciate this platform because it's a very difficult conversation to have. I do not want to be perceived as a fist in the air, smash the patriarchy type of female. That's not me. But I am a female who believes that I am a human being who can do anything that she sets out to do. What do you mean I can't drive a tank? Watch me drive the tank. And I'll drive it better than you. I mean, right. We have that attitude, and fortunately or unfortunately, we have the proof behind us to even show you, right? I served as a member of the Bronco Rifle Team at Western Michigan. If you don't know, females are better during shooting sports. There's something physiological about how the body works in the female body that makes us a better single shot than a male. And that's just fact. So we can, and we are better than a lot of these things than the males are. Mm-hmm. And there's so much ego behind the scenes. And it's hilarious, right? And it plays out within our military female community. So I run a program that provides peer support to military women. When I work on that program, it is like walking into the lion's den every day. Military women are significantly challenging. They're so unique. They're incredibly different, every single one of them. If you think you can stereotype a military female, I'm sorry, but you can't. One of them loves pink and the other one loves black. One of them is overweight and the other one is a bodybuilder. You cannot stereotype a military female. And I think that is a challenge in itself when it comes to how do we just embrace them? Well, you got to embrace a lot if you're going to embrace a military female.
What is driving you in this work that you're doing?
I think Joan of Arc is a good example of that. You know, she heard something from God and she went and told her uncle, hey, I think I'm supposed to go like fight in this war. And her uncle laughed at her and said, you're a little girl. You can't do that. And look at what happened. So what drives me day to day is really none other than just trying to answer what I believe that I'm called to do. When I walk into the office, I have the blessing of being on Selfridge Air National Guard base. I'm on the federal installation, and I get to walk into a building that has a chapel. And before I touch a computer or open an email, I put my head down and I ask, what do you want me to work on today, God? And how do you want me to do it? And then I go upstairs and I take my agenda book with my 20 checklists and God shows me which one to focus on. And that's what I do. And the driving factor is that if I get out of the way, he takes over. And the results are exponentially greater than anything I could ever have come up with on my own. And that is truth. When Shelley tries to do things Shelley's way, things fall apart. Discharge orders come in her email. You know, we end up with a really terrible, horrendous marriage. And when I started doing things God's way, almost a decade ago now, gosh, life is so good. And it just fits.
Give us an example of what that dichotomy might have looked like your way and God's way.
So Shelley's way was to be a military chaplain. God's way was to be a chaplain who serves people who serve the military. Shelley's way was to be extremely physically fit and overt about being physically fit to prove and show that she was a leader. God's way is take care of the body so that the soul has a vessel to live in day after day with reverence. Shelley's way is checklists and calendars and 30, 60, 90-day planning meetings and every minute of every day planned out. God's way is the baby has a fever today. You ain't going nowhere.
Right. Really cool. Really inspiring. I mean, it really makes me think about how we can often get in our own way, you know, and what happens when we're able to listen. And I mean, it's the work you're doing just sounds incredible. What do a lot of obviously therapists, coaches listen to this? What do they not fully understand, or what do the majority of therapists need to understand more clearly about military personnel?
So if you've never served in the military, you're not going to be able to make that connection, period. That goes for even the leaders of our nation. When we have a president in office who's never served in the military, how can they be in charge of military operations? And I think that sometimes we try to justify it or say that we're very like-minded or we have things in common. But the fact of the matter is, unless you signed on that dotted line, there is something special and unique about a military person and first responder that you can't touch. So I think in order to be a successful military therapist, you have to have come from some kind of background. And I don't mean even being the spouse. And that's a very touchy subject. And I know that I'm speaking direct to a lot of hearts right now. But the spouse of somebody who has served in the military is not the same as somebody who served themselves.
So are you saying that therapists who haven't served in the military shouldn't work with veterans or people who are in the military?
I think that you need to recognize that and pay attention to it. And you can do that by encouraging your own professional development. So go on a mission trip, volunteer with some type of military organization, and go out in the field and witness it firsthand. Don't read it in books. Don't look at videos. Don't watch it on YouTube. Just because you have your Google glasses on and you've walked through the virtual rendition of XYZ, you can't even imagine what it's like on a day-to-day level. Right. So if you really feel like you've never served in the military, but you have a heart for military people, then you have to have a conscious effort to close that gap, because that gap is bigger than you think it is. And I'll even share with you, so I'm remarried, and my husband now is not military. He had medical issues when he was younger that prevented him from joining. That's a huge personal loss for him. He wishes so deeply that he could have served in the military in his lifetime. And so what his relationship has shown me is how big that gap actually is, and how big of a heart a lot of people do have to work with our military, even though they're quote unquote not qualified. That's the toughest thing, is even if you have all the doctoral 10,000 letters at the end of your name, if you didn't sign on the dotted line, then you're not qualified. And I'm talking about myself as well, right? So in the military, it's a huge, I call it a butt sniffing contest, like dogs, right? You wear your resume on your chest. I did not serve in combat. There's a huge portion of military people who do not believe that I am an equal to them because they served in combat and I did not. I can't argue that. I can't negate it. I'm not even going to try to. So for a civilian to think that they're, toe to toe, and you're just not. And that's okay, right? We can humble ourselves. Even if we have 10,000 letters behind our names, we can humble ourselves to say, well, that's your lived experience and that's not mine. Just because you've read a lot about it doesn't mean that you've walked the walk.
All right. Thank you for that. All right. Well, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you, Shelley?
So unique for our listeners today, we did create a special landing page. So if you go to othersoverself.com/TT, that's Tango for trauma therapist, othersoverself.com/TT, you're going to find a special landing page. And I'm putting on there an article entitled 4 Ways to Make a Meaningful Connection with Military People. Oh. And I truly believe that this is the first step to all of us that have not been in the military, that have a good open heart, and we want to learn more about how to have a good interaction. So definitely check out that landing page, download that article, and I'm not hiding now. I hid in my intelligence career for decades. Now I'm not hiding. If you want to find me, follow me, look me up. My handle is Others Over Self. And again, Shelley Rood, ROOD.
Awesome. All right, Shelley, I'll have that or those links up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Wow. All right. You definitely got to come back here at a later date. And you are just on fire. Shelley, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be here. It was an honor having you on.
Guy, your platform is so unique and so special. And I just want to thank you for allowing open conversation across all spiritualities and all belief systems. If we lose that opportunity for open dialogue, then we lose the opportunity for good socialization. So thanks for what you do.
You're welcome. All right. We'll talk soon. Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. And if you'd like to join the hundreds of other therapists who are each month keeping up to date and informed and inspired about what's going on in the world of trauma, I'd love to invite you to head on over to the Trauma Therapist newsletter. That's the traumatherapistnewsletter.com.